so you get a flavor for me. I am an entrepreneur. I've never had a job other than a job that I created. And my career started completely by accident. After university, I went traveling. I ended up in Los Angeles, and I used the last of my money to buy a beautiful old sports car, a Karmann Ghia convertible. And when I brought the car back to the UK, the guy at customs in Felixstowe, who fills out all the paperwork, offered me double what I'd paid for the car. And so I sold it to him and took the money and went back to Los Angeles and used it to buy 2 cars, brought them back to the UK, sold them, doubled my money, went back and bought 4 cars. And this continued over a 2-3 year period. I moved from Karmann Ghias up through Alfa Romeos and eventually Jaguars and Ferraris and Maseratis. And I felt I could do no wrong. It was like going into a casino and spinning the wheel and knowing every time it was going to come up black. And every time it came up black, and I just kept doubling and doubling. And I ended up with a beautiful, beautiful house in Knightsbridge and a gorgeous, gorgeous girlfriend and a fantastic dog. And I thought I was the bollocks. You know, that I couldn't understand my mates who were complaining about their jobs, where for me it was just this easy ride. What I didn't understand about the market I was operating in at the time, the classic sports car market, was that the whole market was an illusion. It was based upon a then capital gains loophole, whereby if you bought any vehicle that was over 20 years old and you sold it, you didn't have to pay capital gains on the money you made when you sold it. So everybody was piling into the classic sports car market, and the market was just expanding. And there were even hedge funds set up where people were buying classic cars and wrapping them in plastic and putting them in air-conditioned, dehumidified garages and waiting for the capital value to increase. And I sat there happily on the edge of this bubble, truly believing that good value for a Ferrari was 2.5 million quid and that the whole thing would never end. When the market collapsed, it collapsed abruptly, it collapsed overnight. The Chancellor changed the legislation. A Ferrari then failed to reach its asking price at auction, and the whole market fell out of bed. And when this happened, I had 8 containers of Ferraris up the Panama Canal. And the Panama Canal closed, coincidentally, for political reasons. So I was up this really big creek with no paddle, and I lost everything. These things happen really slowly and then really, really fast. I lost the house. I lost the girlfriend. I kept the dog. Because you know where you stand with a good dog. and I ended up with a personal overdraft of £876,000, and I was 23 years old. And I did the only thing I could think of doing at the time, which was to call my dad, who is a deeply lovely and generous man, a professional man. He's always been there for us as a family, always looked after us. And I remember the conversation, Dad, I've got a problem. And no problem, PJ, I'm sure we can help. You know, what's the damage? And I said, well, Dad, it's 876,000. And there was this silence on the phone. And he said, you're on your own. You know, I'm sure you'll learn a valuable lesson. And I did. I learned my first proper business lesson. If you owe the bank 5 grand, you're a bad debt. If you owe the bank 876,000, you're a good customer. And all of a sudden, I was a good customer with my bank, and my then bank manager took me into a room I'd never seen before, and there was a Chesterfield sofa, and he served really nice coffee in china cups, and he started to talk about our problem and how were we going to solve this problem. And I love that we, you know. I suddenly realized I was in a position of some leverage. And I did a deal with the bank, which in short was, if you'll lend me another 250,000 and write my current debt down to 250,000, I'll pay you back the 500,000 over a 3-year period based on the following business plan. And the bank manager agreed, and I've got to say at this stage, God bless Barclays Bank. Because if it was not for that guy, that person, doing that deal with me then, for absolute sure I would not be here now sharing the adventure and the tale that I've been on as a result of it. And that taught me another important lesson. It's easy to do business and make things happen when times are good and cash is flowing and everything's smiling. It's when times are tight and you find yourself in a corner and you absolutely don't know how you're going to get out of that corner. That's when you build the long-term business relationships that will see you through that bad time, as well as the inevitable good times that are bound to follow. Long-term business relationships are of real value. Short-term, one-night stands, you know, they're a laugh, but it's the long-term marriage in business that drives real business value. As a result of that deal with Barclays, I was able to go forward and get involved in my first real business adventure, which I'm going to come back and share with you as a case study, because it's where I made all of my learnings. And that culminated after 7 years in me becoming an expert in provocative brand marketing and brand creation. I realize you don't have to do much to be an expert. You just have to do something, and then you're an expert. And I decided to leverage this newfound position of expertise and start an advertising agency, and then pretty soon realized I needed clients. And the way you get clients as an advertising agency is by being a genuine expert. And the way you become a bona fide expert is by writing a book. And so I wrote a book, and I bought 5,000 copies of the book in hardback to send out to the CEOs and the decision makers of the companies I wanted to be my clients. And as a result of buying 5,000 copies, the book became an international business bestseller. And I was then invited to lecture about these newfound ideas around branding and marketing. And incidentally, I don't recommend the book. It was not a good book. In fact, no one even read them. On page 168 of the book, I laced into the text, blah, 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 blah. And if you've got this far, you've done really well. Give me a call and I'll send you a bottle of whiskey. Because I thought that would generate inbound calls, and no one called, okay? So no one actually read the book. But it didn't matter, because my picture was on the back of the book, and it gave me that positioning, and it allowed me to grow my business. And that agency grew from me and my cousin, who was unemployed when I set it up, to 65 people. And then I sold it very fortuitously in August 2001, which was just before September the 11th. So I was very lucky. I was all wedged up. The market had completely collapsed. And I then invested in my now ex-wife, who's actually genuinely talented, as opposed to being a gifted scammer. And she's a shoe designer. We started a business selling really expensive shoes that no one needs and very few people can afford, based on exactly the principles that I had learned through this education that I'm going to come back and tell you about. Subsequently, with that business, we've gone on to create all the shoes for Alexander McQueen, Cassidy, Polini, a whole bunch of very high-end designer brands. And I now work as a consultant to massive organizations, helping them with their communication and with their clarity. So I've called this presentation Profiting from the Truth. That will become apparent as we go through it. I've also subtitled it Simple is Beautiful. There is a truly excellent book I recommend everybody here read, if you haven't read it already, called Small is Beautiful, by an economist in the late 60s, early 70s called Schumacher. His book is as relevant today as it was back then. It punctured 3 big illusions, and those illusions are as prevalent now as they ever were. In fact, it's worth mentioning. The first illusion is that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. Nothing you can do about it. Well, everything on my career, in my journey, has told me that is not just the way it is. We are the authors of our own creation. We are the writer, we are the producer, we are the director, we are the lead actor in our own movie. And the learning I take from that is this: if in my business, in my world, in my life, I see beauty, well, it's my beauty. And equally, if I see horror, well, it's my horror. Both the good and the bad of it are relevant. The other illusion that the book punctures is there is not enough. There is not enough clients. There is not enough cash. There's not enough marketing material. There's not enough. Well, there is always enough if we're willing to pool our resources, to work together with a common agenda to move in a common direction. There is always enough. Together, we are always stronger. And the third and the most dangerous, damaging illusion is more is better. Well, I can assure you, more is not better. It is just more. And once you've got more, there's always more, and there's always more. More is not better, it is just more. And it's important to recognize that for what it is. Simple is beautiful is a take on that idea of small is beautiful. Again, on my journey, I've noticed that anything more complicated than literally being able to write on the back of an envelope or communicate in 15 seconds to a normal person on the street is either not going to work or it's going to cost shed loads of cash. Keeping things simple has been a guiding principle for me on my journey. And another guiding principle has been the idea of, is this not working? The clicker. It's not working, I don't think. But another guiding principle of my, forget this thing, technology, always a problem, I need you, has been this idea that wherever there is a hidden agenda or an outright lie, there's the potential for profit. Again, that is not my idea, it's an ancient idea. The American Indians said, the antidote is in the venom. Frank Lloyd Wright said, a building should be of the hill, not on the hill. I say, wherever there's a problem, wherever there's a nightmare, something we just don't want to deal with, at the heart of that problem is a solution bursting to come out. So the way I look at life, particularly as an entrepreneur, is I love problems. Because in the heart of that problem, for me, there's the potential for profit. And a great way of looking at life is this. If in your business, in your life, you've got loads of problems, you are truly blessed because the universe is kissing you with those problems and giving you numerous opportunities to change. A problem is an opportunity to change, but only if we're brave enough, if we're courageous enough to stare that demon in the eye, name it for what it is, and then learn the inevitably painful lessons that come out of it. Problems are opportunities. And this is going to sound like a Cinderella story, like a marketing fairy tale. I want you to know it's all true. None of the names and numbers have been changed. And this case study revolves around the tobacco business. So I want to summarize the tobacco business for you really quickly. The tobacco business is a volume game where the government make all the money. 86% of the selling price on a packet of fags is tax. In my view, the guy who's taking 86% of the revenue, irrespective of the industry sector, is the guy who is selling the product. Tobacco companies then are just glamorous tax collectors. It is the government that makes and sells cigarettes. So that is one way of framing up a now £26 billion industry in the UK. And the key issue at the heart of that industry is one simple word: health. And that one word presents a tremendous problem for the poor old seller, for the government. Because on the one hand, they've got the health of the nation in terms of the damage and the disease caused from tobacco consumption, versus on the other hand, the health of the exchequer in terms of all of the revenues generated as a result of tobacco taxation. So on the one hand, they're making all this money. On the other hand, they're damaging all these people. It's a terrible moral dilemma for the poor old state. And this is the taboo at the heart of that industry. This is how you can summarize that horror. Cigarettes are the only legally available consumer product which kill people when used exactly as intended. Okay, now that is a hell of a problem. You can imagine you're on the board of Gallagher or Imperial, R.J. Reynolds, Philip Morris. It's the late 60s, early 70s, and this slide comes up. That is an enormous problem. That is a fantastic opportunity. But rather than embrace that opportunity, rather than own that problem, the tobacco industry collectively decided to retreat from the issue. In retreating from the issue, they uttered only two words: no comment. They stuck their head in the sand. As a result, they had their arse in the air, and they took a fierce kicking from the emergence of a new group of liberty snatchers, these pink-lunged, aubergine-eating curtain twitchers are out there desperately telling everybody what they should or shouldn't be doing, the anti-smoking lobby. Now, and I have no respect, I have absolutely no respect for the anti-smoking lobby, because they have one agenda. Their agenda is prohibition. Whenever you hear this word ban, you know, such a cute little word, ban, what it means is make illegal. It means remove our rights as adults in a free society to make our own decisions and defer those rights to some abstract state that supposedly knows better than us what's good for us. Prohibition is illogical. It is illogical to legislate against someone's appetite. If you want something, you'll get it. It doesn't matter whether it's legal or illegal. All that prohibition does is sweep social problems under legislative carpets. The problems don't go away. They just stay there, out of sight. They rot, they stink. Eventually, they rot their way through the very fabric of our society, and then they cause real problems. Prohibition leads to one thing and one thing only, and that is Al Capone. And I would rather live in a society where I'm free to make my decisions openly at a point of purchase than satisfy my appetite down some dark alley with a gangster. You know, I'm a gentle libertarian. I believe in market forces. I believe in democracy. $1, one vote. That is democracy. All the ballot box, the real ballot box, is at the point of purchase. And you can measure who's winning based upon the amount of dollars that are being bet against their offer. So in terms of all of this, then smoking has become this polemic issue. On the one hand, you've got these Puritan fundamentalist finger waggers telling everybody what they should or shouldn't be doing. And on the other hand, you've got these heroes who even in a hurricane will be outside with the rain coming sideways as they smoke their fags. And then you've got most people, 95% of people, who really just don't care much either way. If you want to smoke and kill yourself, go ahead. Don't tell me what I should or shouldn't be doing. People in a grey, people in a... The beautiful thing about any fundamentalist is how easy it is to wind them up. I was on a live TV debate show with the head of ASH, which is the anti-smoking lobby in the UK. And this bloke was furious with me just for breathing. And he had a red face and a bit of gob on his lip. Mr. Cunningham, what about passive smokers? What about passive? I said, well, in my opinion, passive smokers should buy their own and pay their tax like everyone else. I don't understand why they get... He was so angry, he got up and left. Okay, now, there is a lesson. Never leave a live TV debate show. You will look like an idiot. In his case, he was an idiot. But in any event, there's this polemic, there's this story, smoke, and in that stretch, in that dynamic, in the heart of that problem, I saw an opportunity. An opportunity for a new brand with the unique promise, the truth. Now, you'll notice I've put the truth here in inverted commas, because there is no singular truth. My truth is different to your truth, and your truth is different to your truth, and your truth is different to your truth. Everybody's truth is different. The truth resides in faith. What we believe to be true is true for us. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true for everybody else. In fact, a little bit more respect for each other's truth, this world would be a happier, healthier, less fearful, less dangerous place. The truth resides in faith. Now that for me is a key business insight. It is a key market insight. It tells me the facts matter. Your price point matters. Your product attributes matter. Your distribution matters. Your HR matters. Your logistics matter. All of these things matter. But ultimately, what matters most is what your customers believe of you to be true. Because what they believe you to be, you are. This is the way to look at it. Nobody here controls their brand. Brands do not exist on company boardroom tables. They do not exist in advertising agencies or PR companies. Brands exist in the minds of customers. What customers believe of you to be true is true until you change it, such that you create a belief in their mind which is more in line with what you'd want them to believe. Belief, none of this is new. None of this is new. It's thousands of years. I'll give you an example. Branding, marketing is thousands of years old. Here's an example by way of a story. An angel impregnates a virgin who gives birth to the Son of God, who grows up to die on a cross to save us from our sins, then rises from the dead to sit at the right hand of God the Father in heaven, and will come again in glory to judge us all. Now, in my opinion, that's a long shot. You know, if that was a business plan, I wouldn't invest. You know, that is a big ask. But I would be wrong not to invest, because 30% of the world's population would lay down their life and die for that belief. And that's a fantastic example of branding. They've got a great logo. They've got retail outlets all over the world. They've got a book. You know, if you want someone to believe something, put it in a book, buy it yourself, give it away free. None of this is new. It is about belief. Belief is everything. The questions to be asking yourself is, what do I want my customer to believe? Belief is everything. Perception is everything. So there was a simple promise I thought I could make in the world of tobacco that most people would believe. And that promise is this: smoking kills. I would challenge you to find anybody, be they a smoker or a non-smoker, who didn't hold that to be true. Smoking kills. My view was fine. Okay, smoking kills. As an adult in a free society where smoking is legal, if you then choose to smoke, given that information, it's your responsibility, it's your funeral, too bad you're gonna die. Okay, smoking kills. That's the information you require. If you now choose to smoke, given that information, it's your funeral, too bad you're gonna die. So I created a brand of cigarettes called Death, with the universal symbol of poison and disease as the logo. We also created Slow Death. You know, it's very important to have choice in these matters. And we had the skull and crossbones on every stick, and we couldn't get the Queen's warrant, so we created our own, which was a skull and crossbones on top of a burning funeral pyre where the flames look vaguely like a lion and a unicorn. And underneath it says in the scroll, "Our cause is just, we must prevail." And I was so excited. I've got to say again, God bless Barclays Bank, because this is the idea I went to Barclays with. And one of the caveats they had was, "BJ, we'll back you as long as you can find somebody to manufacture it for you." And I thought that would be a no-brainer. And then I went and had the shortest business meeting of my entire life when I went to see the new brand development director at Gallagher, one of the largest tobacco companies in the UK. And I went into his office with a mock-up pack, put it on his desk cigarettes, these are the coolest, blah, blah, blah. He just picked up the phone, "Security?" And they physically threw me to the ground outside their office. He just didn't get it. He thought I was some kind of like anti-smoking terrorist or something. And then it took me 6 months. I just want to stress how long 6 months is when you're 876 grand personally overdrawn. It's an eternity, because every month you're going down another 15 grand on interest. And it feels like the whole thing is never going to... And here's the message. Be careful what you wish for. Because if you are dogged and you go down the road of trials that you set up for yourself, the universe will wash you up on the beach of your own choosing. She will slam you on that beach, and that beach will be worth exploring. After 6 months, I ended up in Amsterdam in a coffee shop, enjoying a cappuccino, sitting opposite this lovely bloke, and we were having such a laugh. And eventually the conversation came around to, "What do you do?" And it transpired he had just inherited his cigarette factory from his father, and at the same time he was having trouble. He had found religion. He was having trouble reconciling his newfound religious beliefs with the manufacture of cigarettes. I offered him the opportunity to profit from the truth with Death cigarettes. He said amen. The next thing, I had my one-bedroom flat in Lewisham, because I'd now moved from Knightsbridge down to Lewisham. And I'm sorry if anyone here is from Lewisham, but it is the arse end of London. And I was in this one-bedroom flat, and I thought I'd made it. But it was the beginning of a vertical learning curve. A learning curve in terms of taxation, distribution, marketing, finance, HR, law, the whole story. Fundamentally, the journey we were on was becoming synonymous in the minds of customers with the truth, with the health warning, to be the honest cigarette. So on top of the statutory government advice you have to put on every packet of cigarettes, we had our own manufacturer's advice that we put on the side of every packet. Cigarettes are addictive and debilitating. If you don't smoke, don't start. We pledged to donate 10% of our pre-tax profits to non-vivisection cancer research and related charities. Now, the reason we did that wasn't CSR or a guilt trip or altruism. It was very straightforward. Smokers need cancer research. Cancer research needs the money. We needed the smokers. So it created a win-win scenario whereby everybody benefited. And I'm a great believer that if you know yourself to be part of a problem, it is your personal responsibility to become part of the solution. And in business, invite your customer to join with you on that journey. Remove the illusion of separation. The illusion of separation says you are separate from your customer. You are not separate. You are different. Honor the difference, but not the separation. Treat your customer as you would have your customer treat you. This is the point. If you commoditize your customer, do not be surprised when your customer turns around and commoditizes you. Treat your customer as you would have them treat you. And there's only one way in which you'd want to be treated, and that is in love. Love your customer. Treat them as if you were treating yourself. That's how you keep, maintain, and grow customer relationships. So we were all about juxtapositioning. From the no comment from the traditional tobacco industry, we sang a eulogy to cigarettes. Because I love fags. I've smoked since I was 13 years old. And I love putting a cigarette in my mouth and lighting it and hearing the crackle as it burns and inhaling and filling my lungs with warm air and feeling the nicotine rip into my bloodstream and knowing I'm going to have another in 10 minutes. I love fags. They deliver every time. The problem is, you're going to die, and you're going to die horribly. Now, if you're cool with that, you're a smoker. And if you're not cool with that, well, think again. So against the no proof that smoking damages health, we said very straightforwardly, no, smoking kills. In fact, we offered a money-back guarantee on exactly that point. So against their sophisticated brand names, Marlboro, Benson and Hedges, we called our brand Death. While they were trying to camouflage the health warning with their design and packaging, we were actively seeking to become synonymous with the health warning. So while they were offering cowboys and colours with their communication, we were offering a black and white message in a black and white package with the universal symbol of poison and disease. We were saying cigarette smoking is not like hanging around in the Grand Canyon rounding up cattle. It is not like having a moustache driving a jeep through the jungle fighting crocodiles. It is not like being a jet fighter pilot or a Formula One racing car driver. Cigarette smoking is simple. You will have a sublime hit of gorgeous nicotine through your radically shortened life. And then you will die, and you will die horribly. And as I say, if you're cool with that, you're a smoker. And if you're not, you have the opportunity to change your mind. So Death had certain values that we held true. Responsibility, honesty, logic, freedom. Fundamentally, what we were talking about was freedom of choice. Because you can only ever make a choice if you're furnished with the information with which to make a decision. If you're not furnished with that information, you're not making a choice, you're taking a guess. The critical information you need in regard to smoking is you're going to die. Given that information, it's your funeral. So in terms of responsibility, on the back of every one of our packets, we wrote this. Smoking does not make you sexy, stylish, or sophisticated. It kills you. We're not selling a pack of lies. We are selling a pack of cigarettes. In terms of choice, we were saying just say no instead of just say no. Furnish people with the information with which to make a decision, and then honor the decision that they make as adults in a free society. Don't tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing, because on principle, if anyone tells me what I should or shouldn't be doing, I will do the opposite. So, we reinforced all of this with our sponsorship activity, always seeking to own the position in the mind of the customer as the honest cigarette, the honest fag. So, one example, we paid for the life-saving heart bypass operation from a guy from Hull who was being refused treatment by the National Health Service because he was a smoker, which in my view is an outrage because he paid a premium for that service through all the taxes he'd been paying on his fags. We brought him under blue light to London. He had a quadruple heart bypass. He survived. The next day, there was a massive press conference. About 200 members of the press. They were furious that someone should be so audacious as to pull this kind of a stunt. The first question came from the Daily Mirror, who stood up. Mr. Cunningham, are you not just cynically exploiting this man's life to promote your brand of cigarettes? And the answer was, yes. You know, that is exactly what we're doing. Don't you think it'd be more cynical to let this man die? And then the next day, Death Saves Life, Dr. Death in life-saving heart bypass. We got international coverage and we saved the guy's life. Another example, we sponsored the Gay Pride Festival in London as the honest fag, because Gay Pride is all about being an honest fag. We were all about selling honest fags. We brought out Pink Death for the day. I got snogged by Lily Savage, who's a great kisser. It was a fantastic event. And fundamentally, it's exactly the same issue, freedom of choice. Whose business is it how two adults choose to love each other? It's nobody else's business but their own. We should spend a lot more time taking the plank out of our own eye rather than seeking to remove the speck from anybody else's. Mind your own business. It's a fantastic business mantra. particularly for anybody in business. Business is hard enough, let alone worrying about anybody else's business. So in terms of advertising, we never had enough money to actually advertise in a traditional way. And anyway, we couldn't. It was illegal. So what we did was we took out fly posters in the form of a 48-sheet poster opposite the offices of the major newspapers in London. Journalists, like everybody else, come to work with their eyes down. They looked up, they saw a massive poster, they assumed it was a national campaign, and they wrote about it as such. 13.5 million smokers will admit it's bad for them. Only one tobacco company will. They're every bit as good as other cigarettes and every bit as bad. And where we could advertise in the trade press to the trade, we didn't use image advertising, some guy on a Harley riding through the desert with a skull and crossbones on his back. We had something to say, and so we said it verbosely. This says, take an active part in cancer research. Smoke our cigarettes. And then it explains our cancer research policy, etc., etc. And all of this drove phenomenal debate. I recognized that we were burning a bonfire. And the brighter that fire burnt, the more people would come and sit around that bonfire. And if they sat around that bonfire, we had something compelling and relevant to tell them, they'd get their mates to come and sit around too. Brand building is building virtual bonfires and then engaging the audience around that bonfire with stories such that they can spread the message for you. It is about storytelling. It is about engagement. It's about relevancy. It's about passion. So all of this, we had evangelical smokers. But we had a massive problem. We had no distribution. And the reason I learned such an important lesson, it doesn't matter how much people want your product. If it is not on the shelf for sale, they can't buy it. Okay, I know that sounds obvious, but it took me a long time to work that out. And the reason we had no distribution was this. Every point of purchase for tobacco products in the UK is owned by either Imperial or Gallagher. And both of those major tobacco companies didn't want to see a cigarette on the shelf next to their product called Death because they felt it was antithetical to their interests. We tried everything, but every time our reps put the cigarettes on the shelf, their army of reps would take the cigarettes down. We tried our own vending machines. We called them death traps in the form of coffins. We tried everything, but we were losing 0.02 pence a packet, which is a shed load on volume. At this stage, I had 3 factories on the Dutch-German border, 312 employees in the UK, but I was looking at a 4-month burn before we were out of business and had absolutely no cash left. So I was desperately looking for a solution to this massive problem. And at about this stage, I heard about a guy from Newcastle upon Tyne who had convinced a local magistrates court that the 7.5 tons of alcohol he'd brought into the UK from France was for his personal consumption. And as a result, UK tax and duty wasn't payable because he'd already paid it once in France. So I started looking at European law, I started looking at the tax differentials between member states, and I came up with a scheme for price arbitrage, which I put to my then board with one simple slide. I said, guys, I've got an idea, I want to call it Tobacco Direct, where we can offer the UK smoker a 40% discount in price, while we make a 25% net profit margin being paid in advance with no bad debt. Now, my board were naturally interested. You know, they wanted to know what this idea was. So I explained. I knew that a principle of Roman law, which underpins both UK and European law, is que facit per alium facit per se. Now, what that bit of Latin means is, if you appoint somebody to act as your agent, in the eyes of the law, they are you. It's a critical piece of legislation because it means you can't get round the law by way of a third party. If you say to somebody, go and rob a bank, and that person goes and robs a bank, it's as if you were robbing the bank because they're acting as your agent, acting on your behalf. So I said, what would happen if I set up a company to act as agent on behalf of UK smokers, purchasing cigarettes on their behalf in another member state of Europe, then again as their agent arrange for the transport of those cigarettes via DHL to their home address in the UK for their personal consumption? Where would the tax be payable? 70 grand later, Senior Tax Counsel tells me, the tax will be payable at the point of purchase for consumption, which I chose to be Luxembourg because that's where the European Court of Justice is, and I knew that's where we'd end up. So we kicked off this scheme. We kicked it off with a flyer that said, the Grim Reaper don't come cheaper. And it started to go really well. We started to move. After 6 months, we were DHL's largest customer in Europe, flying 2 aircraft full of cigarettes into Stansted every week. We were clearing in excess of £900,000 net profit a week. It was such a laugh. We had to change our whole business. We had a room full of students just opening envelopes, and the whole thing, we were doing 4 check runs a day. The whole thing was growing geometrically. And then there was a knock on the door, and it was Her Majesty's Customs and Excise. I said, boys, come in, you're late. And they all came in, and they sat round the boardroom table, and they all smoked, so I gave them all a fag, and we were having a cup of tea, and eventually, Mr. Cunningham, we better get down to business here. Are there any cigarettes on this premises which have not had UK tax and duty paid? And I said, yes, you're all smoking them. And then they all put out their fags. And then they took everything. They took the computers. I said, you are acting illegally. I'm a good European citizen. They said, you're nothing more than a common bootlegger. I was thrilled. This gave rise to a judicial review. The judicial review judge referred it to the High Court. The High Court referred it on to the Appeal Court. The Appeal Court then referred it on to the House of Lords. On the way to the House of Lords, Her Majesty's Customs and Excise were joined by Imperial and Gallagher, the 2 largest tobacco companies in the UK. The House of Lords then referred it on to the European Court of Justice, where Her Majesty's Customs and Excise, Imperial and Gallagher were joined by every other member state of Europe, apart from Spain and Portugal, who were on my team. So it was me, Spain, and Portugal against every other member state and every major tobacco company. And the European Court's beautiful. It's a horseshoe-shaped building, all wood, with glass at the top, auditorium-type style, and you sit on these seats that rock, and there's a little knob, and you can hear it simultaneously translated in Greek or German or whatever you fancy. And I sat there, and all the lawyers in England, all the glamour, the legal glamour. In Europe, in England, our lawyers are these crow-like creatures with wigs that float about. In Denmark, the lawyers have got big fur collars, and in France, the lawyers have got these golden ropes around their neck, and in Italy, they've just got really nice suits, and all the lawyers were doing their thing, and I sat there truly believing that we were going to win. In the European Court, you don't have 1 judge or 3 judges, you have 10 judges, okay, and they sit around this crescent-shaped table, and this was the core problem that we were giving them. We were asking a £14.5 billion question to our government. Because fundamentally, where we were going was going to force the government to tax compete in exactly the same way that everybody else price competes. You cannot have a single market with different tax regimes. If cigarettes in Brixton are £1.50 a pack and cigarettes in Knightsbridge are 10 quid a pack, you'll just have trucks from Brixton to Knightsbridge all day long. And that is exactly what is happening in the European market. In the European Court, in front of the 10 pink judges, they've got these long silk robes with a soft pink fez-type bed hat, and they sit behind this crescent-shaped table, and in our case, the lead judge was a French judge, and he got up and he gave his ruling, and his ruling was no. And then he gave his reasoning, and I quote, I learnt this off by heart because it cost me 1.6 million quid of my money to hear the bloke say it. Mr. Cunningham, you are right in law, but the law was never intended for you to be right, and therefore you are wrong. Okay, that was his word for word. That was his. I was furious, and I went out. There's a little gullyway, and all the TV. Mr. Cunningham, this is CNN, and what do you make of this ruling? And I was just beep beep and beep beep beep, and my mum was listening. And BJ, you can't talk like that on the telly. And Mum, you don't understand. It was 1.6 million. I was now obsessed with tax. So I started looking at new product development. I started looking. It's important to understand the way cigarettes are taxed. There are 2 taxes. One is an ad valorem tax. That is a percentage of the recommended retail price. So nothing you can do about it. As a manufacturer, you set your price, a percentage goes in tax. The critical tax is what's called a specific tax. That is a tax per specific cigarette stick. That's the tax the Chancellor shifts that moves the whole market, because every baseline product has to move with it. So I started looking at what is the legal definition of a cigarette stick. Cigarettes are defined under European Directive number 32, dated 1979, as cut tobacco, rolled in paper, capable for immediate use for smoking, not exceeding 9 centimeters in total length of tobacco roll, excluding filter or mouthpiece. That is a fag. In other words, you can't have one enormous fag, okay? Because every 9 centimeters, they're going to tax you like it's another. But what it doesn't say is where the filter has to be. So I put the filter in the middle, perforated it. In that way, you could break it. You got 2 fags for the price of 1. I called them 2-for-1 cigarettes. I set up a factory. I patented the machines. I had Booker and Palmer and Harvey set up on minimum orders. The trucks were rolling. I thought I'd made it. And then I got a call through from Sir Bobby Henderson. He's the principal of Her Majesty's Customs and Excise, based up in Salford in Manchester. Oh, Cunningham is a Scottish guy. Oh, Cunningham, why don't you just get a job? I said, Bobby, this is my job. He said, I'm sorry, we can't have it. We're back in court. I said, fine. We were back in court. This time the court case was very simple. What is a half plus a half? That was the court case. I knew I'd lose because I'd been through the whole charade before. So I represented myself. When it was my turn, I had an apple, a tray, and a knife. I said to the judge, how many apples do I have on my tray? And the judge said, you have 1 apple. I then took the knife and I cut the apple in half. I said, and now how many apples do I have on my tray? And the judge said, I will not have this theatrics in my courtroom. And he threw me out. And you won't be surprised to hear that for tax purposes in the UK, a half plus a half equals 2. It's a miracle. Okay, again, I mean, you know, bread and loaves, they've got nothing on HMRC. It taught me a lesson. Everything, even the laws of mathematics is subject to radical and immediate change. Everything is going to change all the time. So in your business, stay flexible. Have many legs, because the more legs you've got, when they chop one off, you can keep running. You know, flexibility is a key part of the successful DNA of any business. Be prepared for the inevitable wind of change, which is going to hit your market. So for me, then, it was back to the drawing board. This was my thinking. How do I encourage distribution, retail distribution? Well, increase the margin to the retailer. How do you increase the margin? Increase the price to the consumer. How do you justify the increase in price? Add content. That line of thinking is absolutely standard for every business. The content normally added is an intangible, a brand value. However, investing in creating a brand value requires an enormous amount of capital. I didn't have that capital, so I put as an ingredient, as an additive, guarana in my cigarettes, which is an energy-giving substance from the Amazon. As a result, I was able to sell 10 cigarettes for the price of 20. This is the opposite of the tobacco business. This is low volume, high margin, started to go really well. My then Russian distributor called me. That's a polite way of describing him. He's a gangster. said, Mr. Bijay, I like your cigarette. Have you got anything better? And I said, well, what do you mean by better? And he said, more expensive. And I said, yes, of course. I went back to the factory. Guys, we've got to come up with something really expensive for the Russian. So we did. We came up with the world's most expensive cigarettes, aluminium packaging, silver-tipped, watermark paper, only leaf, no stem. Beautiful. We called them Treasurer in honor of Bobby Henderson, with a bloated portcullis full of all of that cash. And we made them 20 quid a pack. Why 20 quid? Big number. We just wanted a big, big number. And they started to go really well in Russia. We then launched them at duty-free in Singapore. And at duty-free in Singapore, it's got $23 a carton, $32 a carton. Ours just said, too expensive. For first-class passengers only. And then people were furious that they couldn't buy it unless they had a first-class ticket. It started to go really, really well. And then I heard that BAT, that's British American Tobacco, they are the daddy of the tobacco business. They were going to launch a new product in the super premium category that we created. And I was very nervous because that's BAT. They were going to wipe us out. And then I was delighted because they launched their product. They called it Equinox. But when they launched it at £18.95 a packet, which is truly mad. I mean, who's going to buy the world's second most expensive brand of cigarettes? You know, they should have gone for 23 quid. I'd have had to go to 25 quid. They missed the point. This is not a product. This is a market position. The position in the mind of the customer being the most expensive. As a result of their error, their mistake, we were able to launch the world's most expensive cigars and accessories. That on the left is the world's most expensive ashtray, solid platinum, 36,000 quid. We didn't sell one of those ashtrays, but we got a lot of press off the back of it. So there are a couple of things I now want to summarize and confirm. There is life after death. This is important. The biggest threat to everybody in this room today in business is fear. Fear is the threat. It's the thing that stops us moving. There are two kinds of fear. One is rabbit frozen in headlights. The other is tiger coming, better run. Now one is useful and one not so useful. Fear stops us moving forward. Life after death tells us, have no fear. You cannot fail. Your customer will forgive you if you try something and it doesn't work. But what they will not forgive is entropy. Doing nothing is not an option. Engage your customer, be with your customer, make a promise and keep it. People are interested in ideas. They are loyal to promises, not products, not price points. Make and keep promises. People buy from people. Embrace your customer as a person. Do not commoditize your customer, or they will turn around and commoditize you. And then the only story you've got is a race to the bottom in terms of price discounting. And I do not believe in discounting. Every time I've tried it, it's a nightmare. It's like pissing your pants. It's warm for a bit and then it gets really cold. There is no way back. Stick with your premium. Sell your promise. Keep your promise. The big life questions, the things that allow you to arrive at a promise that you can make or keep, is this. Answer these questions. What's your point and why should I care? When you have the answer to those questions, you have the beginning of the DNA of a brand narrative, of a story that you can make and keep with your customer. The answer is the highest expression of who you really are or choose to be. And make that the thing you sell, not your product. Sell your brand, your promise, not your product. Your brand is your true value. And that demands love. Earlier I talked of fear. What is love? Love is the absence of fear, just as fear is the absence of love. So say to your teams, love what you do. Love where you do it. Love who you do it with. And most importantly of all, love who you do it for, your customer. And if you don't, it is your responsibility to try harder. And if you've tried harder and you still don't love it, then bring the problems up through the organization so the organization can embrace them and change in order to allow you to love them. And if you've tried harder and you've tried to change it and you still don't love it, say to leave. Go elsewhere. Your job is to give your employees something to believe in and love. Their job is to then love it. If they have tried and they have worked and they have tried and they still don't love it, encourage them to leave. Believe or leave. So loving the customer is the key. I've been to many conferences where I've heard great experts talk about customer relationship management, which already confuses me as 3 words. Customer relationship management is about building a strong friendship with the customer. And that starts with just thanking the customer. Because if you thank your customer, you're helping your customer to thank you. And if you're helping your customer to thank you, you are using your customer. And if you are using your customer, you are embracing your customer. And if you're embracing your customer, you are loving your customer. And if you're loving your customer, you are trusting your customer. And if you are trusting them, you are knowing and understanding them. And of course, that whole process is completely symmetrical. By knowing and understanding, you come to trust. In trusting, you are loving. By loving, you embrace. In embracing, you make use of. By making use of, you are being helped by. And in being helped by, you can be truly grateful. Love your customer. Use your customer. Bring your customer with you on the journey. Create a movement, a tribe, fanatics. Get them involved in your business. Remove the illusion of separation. I will say it one more time. Do not commoditize your customer, because otherwise your customer will turn around and commoditize you. The key reminder in everything I want to leave you with is this idea. Be who you really are consistently in everything that you do. People are interested in ideas. They are loyal to promises. The marketplace is a competition between ideas and promises, not products and price points. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much. Thank you.